You have all heard this before regarding the ongoing political controversy, specifically on marijuana and whether or not it should be legalized. As most, if not all of you may be aware, marijuana is currently strictly illegal here in the United States. Marijuana, just like other narcotics, are strictly regulated and enforced by the hand of the Drug Enforcement Agency, otherwise known as the DEA. Now, I'm a college graduate who graduated from medical academia, obtained a medical license and government certification from the Board of Pharmacy and by the state itself, and even work at a government-based pharmaceutical facility. Throughout the days working at such places, I have been dealing with narcotics and even prepared them, and so I am quite familiar and therefore qualified for how the system actually works. Here I'm going to explain briefly how the government regulates controlled substances and give out my opinion regarding whether or not medical marijuana should be legalized. Now here's a disclaimer, I'm not claiming that everyone should do marijuana. As a matter of fact, I think it should undergo some regulations but should regardless be legal at least for medical purposes. Enjoy. Starting in the 1970s, the DEA, which started its name in 1973, was historically known to enforce the utilization, distribution, and even production of controlled substances based on the Controlled Substances Act. Ever since then, the DEA has labeled those substances in specific groupings called Schedules 1 through 5. The question on which schedule group should a controlled substance be labeled on depends on how abusive and addicting the drug itself is. Controlled drugs with the most abusive addicting rate are labeled from Schedules 1 to 2, while those that are somewhat addictive or abusive fall from 3 to 5. Who determines just how abusive and addicting a narcotic is falls more on the opinions, but more importantly, the consensus of the DEA. In mainstream medical practice, however, the utilization of controlled substances is completely legal to use in the medical field as long as it falls in Schedules 2 through 5 and meets certain DEA regulations. Examples of Schedules 2 through 5 used in the medical field, typically distributed from the pharmacy, are tramadol, Xanax or Alprazolam, Vicodin or acetaminophen, which is another name for Tylenol mixed with hydrocodone, and yes, that's right, even cocaine and crystal methamphetamine. All of these controlled substance drugs are used and validated by the hand of the government. Regardless of the legalization of such controlled substances used in the medical field, all of these drugs are still completely illegal in public and require special DEA authorization before being used. By contrast, all the controlled drugs are either too abusive, addicting, or have no medical use fall in the category of Schedule 1. The Schedule 1 group is a special group established by the DEA that makes all those drugs 100% illegal to obtain. Not only are Schedule 1 drugs just illegal to obtain, but they are also illegal to even possess and use in the medical field. In other words, they are off boundaries for both the public and pharmaceutical facilities. Now, throughout history, the DEA has labeled and still currently is marijuana as a Schedule 1 drug along with that of heroin, ecstasy, acids, and other very strong narcotics. According to the DEA, marijuana has been illegal for simple reasons. These so-called simple reasons are based on the claim that marijuana is 1. Highly addicting, 2. Highly abusive, or very dangerous, and 3. It serves no medical purpose at all. Because of these three main reasons, the government has for long classified MJ as completely illegal. Now, what is my opinion about this? One thing that I find quite hilarious and ironic about this is how people that are against marijuana usually say it is highly dangerous to both the user's health and the lives of others. Really? Tell me this then. Why is it that alcohol is legal to use and yet provides significant amount of drug driving, car accidents, and even deaths of other people's lives? Given the significant abusive rate alcohol has, alcoholic drinks might as well be classified as a Schedule 1 substance using this criteria that is used by the DEA. Of course, there are people who are more intellectually versed and will argue that marijuana is dangerous in the sense that it is psychologically dependent or, in other words, addictive. One of the people that is famous to argue such cases is Concordance. Concordance is a YouTube user known for his educational videos of science and what he calls pseudoscience like intelligent design, and argues against marijuana by citing peer-reviewed papers where MJ supposedly has negative effects to public health. Here are his videos.
Myth number 1. Cannabis isn't addictive. Research on the topic doesn't support this common belief. The active ingredient THC causes physical and psychological dependence in a percentage of users, estimated to be between 7 and 10% in some studies.
Sure, it is true there is to some degree evidence that marijuana can be addictive, but he is wrong on one point. Even though he has acknowledged that weed has medical applications such as that in chemotherapy, he believes that marijuana poses a significant problem in a negative manner. The problem with concordance, although he is not necessarily completely anti like the others whenever it comes to these type of research-based conclusions, is how often they tend to exaggerate the overall effects from these papers rather than actually stick to the actual statistics. Just like concordance has argued in this video, one effect of marijuana is addiction. While at first this may seem as a reasonable argument if you actually put the statistics in practice, the 7 to 10% addiction rate really doesn't at all sound that scary. Using the estimated claim that, let's say, 7% of marijuana users will experience addiction, that means that if 100,000 people were to blaze and get stoned, only about 7,000 people out of 100,000 users by average will fall under the addiction category. Now that doesn't sound scary at all, doesn't it? Of course, it is only people like Concordance and other anti-marijuana people that will stick to the science, but fail to teach it properly to the media who have no idea how to read scientific papers given their lack of knowledge of how to read and understand statistics. With statistics, it is so easy to make a lie even if it is false and seems really convincing. Now, another ridiculous argument used by the anti-marijuana community also claimed that MJ is known to lead into psychotic mental issues. Here's another video of Concordance deception in regards to MJ causing mental health issues.
Myth number 5. Pot is basically herbal and healthy if you discount the effects of smoking it. Pot negatively affects memory and learning, existing psychoses, brain development in adolescence, and may worsen symptoms of depression or schizophrenia. There's new research that it's a significant risk factor in the development of psychoses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The active ingredient marijuana causes changes to your brain that predispose you to psychoses and mood disorders later in life. This includes mania, schizophrenia, and depression. The risk increases with how early you start and how much you smoke. Using several illicit drugs like pot and stimulants and a family history of mental illness greatly increase this risk. For example, the most conservative figures from recent studies found a population of pot smokers are between 1.2 and 2.8 times as likely to develop a psychotic disorder. Other studies, less controlled for other drug use, have found that high consumers of cannabis are 6 times as likely as non-users to develop schizophrenia within a 15-year follow-up window. This increased risk of psychoses also correlates to an increased risk of suicide. Any marijuana use made a population of Swedish men between 1.3 and 2.1 times as likely to attempt suicide.
Actually, no, Mr. Concordance. You need to go back to Statistics 101 because it is pretty obvious that you don't know how to read the data even though you act like you're speaking for science. One of his obvious flaws that I noticed when talking about the data is his quote-unquote, the populations of pot smokers are 1.2 times 2.8 likely to develop mental disorders like schizophrenia. Actually, no, that is not how you read what is called in statistics a 95% confidence interval. A 95% confidence interval is simply an estimate of statistics where there is a 95% chance that the true value or the true percentage of the population lies between the confidence interval, although not necessarily specify exactly where, whereas there is a 5% chance that the true percentage rate of populations developing schizophrenia does not lie in the interval. Now here's another thing, Concordance. There is no such thing as 1.2 times 2.8 likely of all MJ users to develop mental health issues. Actually, nowhere in the data does it imply that. If you actually look at the data, it actually says that only about between 1.2 to 1.4% of all marijuana users will develop mental disorders such as schizophrenia. How likely is that? Well, putting once again to the statistics at play using the 1.2% rate, if there were 1 million users, then only about 12,000 of marijuana users will experience mental health issues such as schizophrenia. Now compare 12,000 with a total of 1 million users. Now once again, that doesn't sound scary, doesn't it? Also, to say that marijuana has a significant risk for causing mental health issues and even suicide is pretty doubtful, considering how the effect of such psychosis is extremely limited to only a certain amount of populations as opposed to the majority. But this isn't a surprise, really. Eventually, something strange or coincidental is bound to happen as more samples increase. It's called the law of large numbers, and as something that keeps on happening increases, eventually something weird or unusual might pop up. But here's the thing, Cocorners, and for all you anti-marijuana people, just because there are papers showing negative effects doesn't necessarily mean anything. One thing to remember here is that just because an effect is found doesn't necessarily mean it plays a significant role in general. This is a problem when it comes to researchers. Rather than sticking to what the data actually says, they often tend to exaggerate such effects and treat it like if it's going to cause a great impact. This isn't surprising, actually, considering how research has led to common false paranoia teachings, like, for example, where California and perhaps in other states, that chocolate milk from school supposedly lead to obesity issues and so therefore must be banned. Or the wild belief that since radiation is found in cell phones and must then cause cancer. Wrong. Evidence for an effect is not equal to evidence that the effect has any practical significance or actually plays a significant role in the real world. But let's go on with one of the anti-marijuana people's biggest claim and fear, that marijuana is a natural psychologically dependent drug. So I guess MJ should be illegal then, considering how it is psychologically dependent. Well then, all the Schedule II drugs like morphine, methamphetamine, tramadol might as well be stopped being used in the medical field and be labeled as a Schedule I drug then. I'm pretty sure that all those Schedule II drugs used in the medical field like hospitals, such as cocaine as used as a painkiller, are more addicting and dangerous than marijuana, and they dare say that it should be illegalized. How ironic, considering their blind hypocrisy and ignorance. But here's the thing. Even if MJ tended to have some degree of negative effects, I'm pretty sure it is more safer and more medically useful than those that fall under the Schedule II category. But oh wait, that isn't going to happen, perhaps, considering how the DEA and all the anti-marijuana people would rather cover their ears and remain ignorant to the truth. Truth is, marijuana isn't at all as dangerous as those anti-people often make it. In fact, it is perhaps the most safest narcotic natural substance than other man-made narcotics. But of course, we will always have people that will act like they know what they are talking about when in reality they really don't. Well, that's the end of my presentation, so thanks for watching.